Welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to me to introduce the new magazine published by Iaac and co-published with Actar Publishers. This is Ricardo de Besa. I am editor-in-chief in Actar Publishing, as well as in the Urban Next platform. So today, as I was mentioning, we are very happy to introduce the Iaac Bits, the printed edition of the issue 9, called Black Ecologies, which is in somehow the main topic we are going to treat in this debate. That in somehow is part of the Semana de la Arquitectura here in Barcelona. So first of all, I want to congratulate to the Iaac for do the effort of publishing a magazine and pushing the results in which they are searching and producing all of this kind of amazing knowledge in the institution. And I think it's a very good news to have this printed edition of the magazine around the world distributed. And for us, it's a very good pleasure to become part of this publishing project. Let me introduce briefly. We are going to organize the event in 3 parts. The first one, I will introduce briefly each of the speakers who will be introducing a kind of a statement of main ideas about the essays or research or papers they have been contributing in the Iaac Bits. Afterwards, I'm gonna have a question for each of them. So that will be the second part. And the last part, I'm gonna be open the discussion. So all of you who wants to introduce some ideas, questions, or suggestions into the topic, right? So before to start introducing Areti, only I want to say that Actar is always pushing the boundaries in the discipline, and for this reason we have been publishing since the beginning of the foundation of the Iaac all of the publications that they were producing, since the Metapolis Advanced Architecture Dictionary to this new one, which we are co-editing or co-publishing with them. No? But also we are trying to publish this kind of new cutting edge knowledge who wants to push these boundaries, as I was mentioning. And for this reason, I think this topic of the dark ecologies, or how the ecology is becoming part of the design, it's a very important and topic that we need to face it and to bring it into the audiences. So in that sense, with no more delays, I am introducing Areti Markopoulou. He's a doctoral architect, recent doctoral architect, researcher and urban technologies, working at the intersection between architecture and digital technologies. She's the academic director at the Iaac, and where she also leads the Advanced Architecture group, which in somehow the results of the group, part of them is becoming of the content of the journal. Her research and practice seeks to redefine architecture as a performative body beyond traditional notion of statics materiality, approximate data, or standardizing manufacturing. Areti is also founder and principal of the multidisciplinary practice Design Dynamics Studio, an editor in our platform, Urban Next. And she also has served as a curator for international exhibition, many of them, such as the On-Site Robotics at the Barcelona Costrumat in 2017, Print Matter, Hypercities in Shenzhen Biennale, and many others. So with no more delay, I give the word to Areti. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. It's lovely to receive an introduction. Usually I don't, so thank you for that. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the debate of Black Ecologies. Today we decided to open this event within the Barcelona Architecture Week as a virtual event to everybody, and invite some of the contributors of the journal Black Ecologies. And I will just make a short introduction. I was trying to put some notes on how this issue started to emerge, and in a way I wanted to have a short introduction to explain what were the thoughts before coming into creating this group of creating the journal with the topic of Black Ecologies. And we had a lot of discussion with the co-editors of the book, with Manuel Gausa and Jordi Vivaldi. And in a way, we were trying to, of course, on the one hand, try to see how big part of the work that we are developing at Iaac is responding to the current challenges that we are living in. The ecological challenge in the traditional way, or in the way that it is limited only into the climate change, is of course one of the very important pillars of the work that we are doing at Iaac, but that's not the only. We know that the impact of our growth, the impact of our urbanization, the impact of our current capitalistic, political, economical structure, or even the impact of our intellectual strength has been so immense in the last decades that we even made it to define a geological era, what we call the Anthropocene. Not everybody accepts it as from the scientific side, but we have defined a geological era that is actually describing the human impact in the planet. And we believe that in front of these challenges, we have the responsibility to rethink the traditional basis upon which architecture and urban design has operated during the last decades. And we also, somehow we are called or we are urged to work together with different disciplines towards a new ecological wisdom. And ecological wisdom that, I don't know, if you allow me, it goes beyond the traditional, let's say, dichotomies of the inside and outside, and it goes beyond the traditional dichotomies of what is natural and what is artificial. So the term of dark, hybrid, or black ecologies, as the title of this journal, they are ecologies that they are emerging as part of an undeniable cultural shift, a cultural shift that is deriving from the unique merge of the physical and the digital on the one hand, so the organic and the inorganic, but also from the unique collaboration of humans, other living species, as well as technology. And these kind of thoughts are not new, and they are not, of course, deriving initially from the architectural discipline. We know that there have been a lot of different thinkers and philosophers that they have trying to somehow define this kind of shift or this unique merge within our contemporary society. And I'm not going to, I wanted to refer to some of them just for the sake of the comfort with the conversation. And I would like to start with Kevin Kelly, because I love his out of control theory, where he analyzes a new era with machines and systems that they drive our economy, and therefore they drive our society, are becoming so complex and automated that it's difficult to distinguish them from the living things. And therefore it is very difficult to control them. And then within the similar notion of control also, Braidotti, he tries to redefine the contemporary subject. And we know that his theory is based on the fact that we are inhabiting as contemporary subjects spaces that we don't control, but we are sharing a life space, let's say, with other agents, which are cultural, which are technological agents, which are biological agents. And if we take it from a more futuristic, maybe, perspective, Ray Kurzweil has also been working and foreseeing that this unique merge will drive us towards a state of a kind of a technologically enhanced human nature, what he calls the technological singularity, no? While of course, last but not least, Timothy Morton, which has been the inspiration for this book, he introduces the term dark ecology as a kind of a paradigm shift on a reality where we are all coexisting in a complex interconnection, let's say, between natural technological expressions and all form of lives as humans. So this framework, let's say, calls architecture and urban design practices to redefine their operation, in order to create processes or in order to create spaces that they are including and they are defined by all humans, but also machines, the existing living species, but also the species that they are about to come. And if that is, I'm not sure if that will probably minimize our human negative impact, but it will definitely maximize our connection with everything that's around us, and it will definitely introduce new processes of how architecture and urban design practice, let's say, can contribute into the creation of new natural or hybrid or black and dark spaces. And within this journal, there are a lot of different projects and contributions that in a kind of a pioneer and experimental way, same as much of the work that we are doing at Iaac, they try to merge different unusual suspects. No? They try to merge humans with robots, biology with artificial intelligence, nature with technology, and they open up questions of what has been considered ecological in architecture until now. And as my friend Francois Ross says, beyond the greenwashing or the traditional greenwashing, let's say, of the architecture and the urban discipline. So this is a small, let's say, introduction to what we have been thinking and working on during this issue. And Ricardo, I think that with this, we can pass to the next speakers and we will have the possibility to come back and discuss.
Good. Thank you, Oreti, for the introduction of the topic and to talk about this very important issue that we have to face. No? Now, let me introduce Manuel Gausa, doctoral architect, full professor of architecture and landscape design at the UNIHE, University degli Studi at Genova, as well as a coordinator of the PhD program there and a co-director of the group of research, landscape and urban advanced design in the same school. In 2000, he founded the Gausa Actar Architecture, and from 12 and 15, he was the dean of the Iaac itself, and also was part of the advisory council for the sustainable development in the government in Catalonia. From 1991 until 2000, was the director of the magazine Quaderns d'Arquitectura i Urbanisme, where I had the luck to be part of the editorial team together with Manuel. And he was also a founding member of the Actar Architecture Publishers, as well as the Actar office, and also part of the founder of the Iaac. He has been publishing a lot of books and articles, probably some of them published thanks again with us, in Actar, as the one that I mentioned, the Metapolis Dictionary of Advanced Architecture, Hyper Catalonia, Operative Optimism, or recently the opening that is part of his PhD dissertation. So Manuel, now is your time. You could introduce briefly why did you started with the Iaac Bits and how much is necessary to keep publishing all of the research that you are producing in the Iaac.
Well, thanks a lot, Ricardo, that we are friends. Thanks a lot for all the people that are following this communication. I see 100 people is enormous. And thanks also for the week, the Architectural Week of Barcelona to be there. And evidently, as you have said, that I was co-founder of a lot of things, that is true that also in the Iaac, always we have work in teams, but not because it's important, the teams, evidently, but because we are absolutely persuaded that today the research and also the innovation is done by synergy, not by personality, big masters, etc., but with this idea of people that is sharing complicities. In fact, there was a lot of founders, yeah, senior founders, young founders, also in Actar, senior founders, young founders, is a lot of founders, but in fact, because this idea to push together things. Just two things. The first is I don't enter in the contents a lot. There is a lot of good contributors to explain more the idea of Black ecology, but I like a lot Black ecology. The title I like a lot because the idea of black is something very linked with a lot of things. But for me, with the Black novels, and in the Black novels, you know that there is something that there is a kind of a rebel thing, something intense, intriguing, but at the end, ethic and singular. And I think that in these new ecologies that can be also expressed as bold ecologies, not the bucolic ecology or the hippie ecology or the revisionistic or how to explain, or essentialistic ecology, or fundamentalistic ecology to conserve the things, but also to be proactive. You need also an ethic, but you need something that is not so purist, but more intriguing. But I don't want to enter there. I want just to enter in the bits, because it's true that when we found the Iaac, it was very clear that it was an experimental center, very linked with the technologies, very linked with the science. This is very clear, but it was also very, very linked at the beginnings, always has been very linked with the culture. But the culture, understanding the culture, not only as an erudition, but as a creation. The culture is creation, is innovation for us. Evidently for other people, it can be erudition and can be repetition and can be academicism. For us, culture is creativity, is innovation. And for this, it was very clear that when it was founded by Metapolis was a cultural association, in fact, but was linked with this idea that we need to diffuse, not ourselves, but to diffuse a new logic that was born in these moments and in the beginning of the 20th century, that was at the end the logic that has been so accelerated. But it was very clear that it was a change of era, a change of logic, a change of thinking, and it was clear that it was not Metapolis the only protagonist. It was a network of people that was working in these situations. And evidently, we were very proud to be ourselves, as the Iaac is very proud to be itself. The Iaac is the Iaac. But at the same time, I think that the Iaac is, as Metapolis, as Quaderns, so generous to demonstrate their research in relation with a network of complicities that are in the world. And it's not evidently an eclectical culture. It's something that is linked with a complicity of research in some line. But always in all the publications that we did as Metapolis, Iaac, etc., it was this, how to explain, eclosion of different people that was there trying to have a line of research, perhaps not super coherent, it's not important, but very consequent. This is different, the coherence and the consequent, to understand that it was a new thinking very linked with these challenges that Areti was talking about. No? The information, the interaction, the integration of systems, the capacity to have a new ethic, but that is perhaps not so naturalistic, but not also so artificial, that is more hybrid, etc., etc. There is more mixed, this capacity to accept these things. When also in Quaderns we were together, we tried to do this to help to the young, not young, but the emerging situations more than the official, conventional standard of, if you want, powerful people or powerful conventional academical ways. No? For us, the most important was to diffuse and to the new ideas. And these new ideas were not only our ideas, it was ideas of a network of people, and for this, the importance of teams. When I come back to the Iaac as a dean, as you say, it was true that there were different kinds of publications, but this idea to have a platform that was more or less a little constant, no, something was a kind of a reigning element in every in different sequences was very important. We were in a crisis because was 2012 was practically after 2008 was a lot of years of crisis and not economical good elements, and we invent with the help of evidently Areti, but other people as Matilde, Marengo, I remember at the beginning, and Jordi, evidently it was absolutely important, and also Silvia, no, in this moment, and I won't talk about this person, but Areti always has confidence in this. We invented something a little, how to explain, more amateur, if you want. That was the Iaac, not amateur because it was not serious, but very serious, but more cheap, who was this idea to have a magazine, who was a deconstructed magazine with every issue, the Iaac Bits. I remember a meeting of all the people of the Iaac trying to decide the name. At the end, we decided this idea of bits that was very linked with the digital era, but also with the capacity to have a pilules. No? Another possibility of name was Iaac Pilules, no? Or Iaac, I don't know, no? Iaac Docs, but the Iaac Dog was not. At Iaac Bits, wow, we say, yes, it's Iaac Bits. And we decided this, also I remember in a meeting, and the Iaac Bits was this idea to have an issue with the deconstructed, at the beginning, with the deconstructed papers that 12 papers as the apostoles, have a issue, no? It was different papers, separate, and these were an issue. It was very interesting. We did 8 issues with this format. Very interesting, with a lot of people collaborating there, and what was Claudia and Pasquero and other people were in this adventure. But in some moment, and I finish, I remember perhaps 3 years again, it was a new step to say, well, perhaps we need to do a jumping of scale, to do something more, not only professional, but more serious and more ambitious, to have the idea to do a magazine more link with the idea, not apparition of papers, but a more clear format of a magazine that can be competitive and ambitious in the difficult world of the magazines that you know perfectly, and in the difficult world of the editions. But why not if we have a different kind of contents? And I think I am very proud, but I don't enter of this magazine. I am absolutely proud. You know that I was director of Quadens. I am proud of Quadens when we did. We did it, and you were absolutely important. And Verb and other kind of publications. But to be sincere, I think that this issue of Black Ecologies, and I think that the next that we are preparing, are very linked with a very innovative and very exigent research. And this probably is more linked with Areti and Jordi, that are more exigent than me, because they are absolutely exigent. And but I think that this exigence and this very intensity with the absolutely innovating things that are now in the research, because Quadens was more a magazine of the order of architects, and you remember the equilibriums that we did to have something that was more linked with the research and the professional. Also, Verb was an invention, very interesting, but also with other kind of elements. Also, other kind of the dictionary was another kind of it. But the Iaac Bits is very linked with the innovation, and absolutely with the innovation and the research. And the research that is operational, evidently, is not a utopistical research, but very linked with this. And I think that this first issue is, for me, sorry for them to do this, but very, very serious. Has been probably, I must congratulate for my colleagues, as I say, Areti and Jordi. I want to remember also Silvia, that was always, Silvia was always very close of the idea to have a jumping of scale with Areti there, because for me probably it will be rest, because I am more comfortable in the other situations that were more easy, because it's not easy to as you know, to build to construct a magazine with intensity. But in this case, to finish, the importance of the Iaac Bits is to mix together productions out of the Iaac, productions of the Iaac, horizontal productions of researchers, names that are important there, and to have this mixicity that for us always was important. It's not a glamorous magazine of big names. It's not only a school magazine of course yearbook. It's a research where we have a lot of situations with people that is research people that are doing not the students but research, other people that are experts, and people that of the Iaac and people of outside. This is the Iaac Bits. It's a platform of diffusion, of dissemination, and I think also is a platform of complicities. This is the most important, a platform of complicities.
Thank you, Manuel, for introducing this amazing project. Now, after listening Manuel, who is acting as a director of the magazine, Areti, who is acting as an editorial curator, now I will introduce Jordi Vivaldi, who is the chief editor and who is pushing a lot this kind of project, as I know. No? So Jordi is a doctor architect and PhD philosopher candidate in Switzerland. Jordi is currently working as a faculty and research in several international architecture schools, such as the same Iaac, the Bartlett in London, Propur in Buenos Aires, or IOT in Innsbruck. His field of work lies in the critical and formalistic theorization on experimental contemporary architecture in relation to the technological, aesthetic, political, and metaphysical condition of the 21st century. Besides several articles and lectures, this work has recently crystallized in 2 books that are now in process and is going to be published by Actar. I am very proud of that. The first one is the Threefold Logics of Advanced Architecture, co-edited together with Manel Gausa and co-published as well with the Iaac. And the second one is his PhD dissertation, entitled Continuous While Discrete, the Problem of the Floor under the Emergence of the Subjectlessness Condition. So Jordi, your time to introduce briefly, please, your topic on the journal.
Yeah, so thank you, Ricardo, for the introduction, and thank you to everyone for being here. I would like to briefly introduce the argument of this edition and also the argument that I have that has been my contribution. So Black Ecologies, the term Black Ecologies probably is a good idea to look it in opposition, or at least in tension, with the expression of green ecology, no? And probably most of us would question, well, which is exactly the difference in between one and the other? Are they only 2 sides of the same coin, or is just the same established discourse with a refreshed or renewed look, no? So which are the main differences that we can establish in between both? So in this sense, I think it's very important to raise up the notion of this idea of the mother nature, no? So this mythological Greek figure of Gaia. When we grow slow, we have understood always nature under this umbrella of mother nature, of the Gaia, of nature as being a harmonic, and then garden, which is perfect, which is tender with us, which is warm with us, which is indulgent with us, no? And that, however, is causing what I would say 3 main problems in order to proceed. One is that it is imposed as an authority. The second one is that it obstructs certain alternatives. And the third one is that it's even defining certain moral values, no? So in this sense, it is presented as sort of immaculate, idyllic and pristine approach that cannot be disturbed, that cannot be, let's say, modified, and therefore it is constituted as a sort of reactionary conceptual tool. So we would like to resonate probably more with a different conception of nature, which is the one that we are posing on the table. No? So it's the nature that we define as this sort of tentacular compound, no, of biological, technological, algorithmic, geological or even zoological processes or agencies, no, that in in which sense, of course, they're always under resonance with other thinkers. No, I have in mind the techno-nature of Slavoj Žižek or the dark ecologies of Timothy Morton. No, and that in general, what mainly impacts, the main impact of that is that we are blurring the epistemic categories of modernity, no, that they were always, let's say, separating in between the pure and impure, culture and nature, human and non-human. No? So here is where lies this new approach to nature. And I would frame the difference in between the first and the second, in between the latter and the former, in between green ecology and black ecology in three main points. No? So the first point is that black ecologies is supposed to approach nature as a hackable nature, as a manipulable nature, and therefore is rooted on, for example, in 1996, the Dolly clonation, in 2006, the human genome map, in 2016, the artificial DNA. So we are not anymore in front of a natura naturata, but in front of a natura naturans, yeah, so that we can manipulate it, we can change, that is imperfect, that is chaotic, that is indeed changeable. The second point is that it does not necessarily have Prometheic epics, no? So it's not trying to have salvific pretensions, it's not trying to come back to a sort of primitive nostalgia, it's not trying to be posed as a sort of ground zero where we should always try to come back. It's just mainly saying that the construction of nature that we have done until today is nothing else than that, a convention, a social construction. And it's not a naturalized version of nature, but it's a culturalized one, and therefore it can be changed, it can be understood in other manners that could open new perspectives. The third one, and the one for me is really clear, is that the notion of ecology that was, let's say, had a big impact in the 70s, it was especially built in some documents like the one of Buckminster Fuller, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, or Brand's Earth Catalog, and those ecologies were still placing the human being outside what Bruno Latour would define as the great outside of nature. No? So that's why we were seeing the Earth from outside. That's why we are speaking, Fuller is speaking of the spaceship, no? As a spaceship that is driven by us that we're supposed to be outside somehow. So what we are saying here is that there is not anymore this great outside. So nature is not that artificial, that sort of construct which is somewhere else and we are separated from it, but we form part of that. Not precisely because we form part of that, we are immanent to that. No, we are not anymore transcendent to that. So the question that we put to all the contributors, that of course each one of them had its own approach, is, well, taking into account that architecture and naturalists had a certain dialogue, sometimes in opposition, sometimes in alignment. Sometimes we were looking for figurativity, sometimes we were looking for metaphors, sometimes for performance, sometimes for contemplation, sometimes for behavior. The question is, which are the opportunities that this new approach to nature that we define as Black ecologies open up for architects, and which is this type of dialogue that we can establish now with this approach to nature. No? So these are let's say the umbrella that we put on the conceptual umbrella we put on the table. And moving now to my particular specific contribution, which I named with the term matterlessness, no? So this lack of matter. So what I'm trying to argument here is that in a moment when, of course, the notion of matter is widely and deeply celebrated, my argument here is to say it actually is an empty term. No? So it's a term that it has become obsolete, and that it has actually and paradoxically been totalized by the notion of form. No? So just to give you a couple of arguments on that, of course, if we understand as the starting point for this discussion, the hylomorphic model of Aristotle, in which you have matter on the one side and form in the other one, and matter is understood as a sort of neutral, flat, homogeneous receptacle, no? That is always in attendance for form, understanding form as a pattern, as a father, as a sort of active and heterogeneous structure, which is not a figure. It's not a figure in this sense, no? It's an active heterogeneous structure. So this sort of very much heteropatriarchal approach to the problem is to the notion of matter and form is the one that has been the prevalent one in architecture in the last century, since Alberti defining architecture as cose mentale, no? Mentale in the sense of being an idea, an eidos, the morphos, no? And at the same time, the modern movement using the concrete as a sort of neutral, flat, homogeneous, generic matter that can take any form, where the architect as a demiurge is landing and is providing form to that concrete matter. Beside that, of course, we had a sort of clandestine recovery of the notion of matter. I'm thinking in the notion of truthfulness, and I'm thinking in Choisy, in Semper, in the book, that they were giving importance to matter because of construction problems. No? Their drawings were always showing how construction was happening, and therefore was important to show matter. But we have another strategy in the 20th century, which we could call with the term, in which matter was understood as containing a set of natural forces, no? And the building and the nature was to be a sort of seed that is growing. I'm thinking here in Bruno Todt, I'm thinking in Steiner, no? So this sort of process, it seems that culminates, or that the biggest effervescence is happening now with the consolidation, emergence and consolidation of new materialism, no? And we have some thinkers like Roger Braidotti, De Landa, or Keren Barat, no? In which they are defining a new approach to matter, which is not anymore the Greek Hellenistic heteropatriarchal understanding of matter, but is a matter that is as well active, is a matter that is well heterogeneous, is a matter that is as well structured, no? And from this approach, what we have seen is that in architecture, in the realm of experimental architecture, a myriad of experience, of studios, of articles, they have appeared with the term matter, no? So I just mentioned some of them: vibrant matter, informed matter, feeling matter, programmable matter, robotic matter, living matter, self-organized matter, or digital matter, no? So as we can see here, what matters is not the term matter. What matters is the term that is before the term matter, no? So in this sense, at the same time, all these different terms, they are based in three main, or let's say that all of them, they flirt with three main concepts. One of them is information, another one is performance. So matter is informed, matter performs, and matter is understood as a platform, no? So the three terms includes the term form. So matter is informed, that is, it has a structure. Matter performs, that is, it is active. Matter is a platform, that is, it is heterogeneous. So let's say that my argument finishes by saying that actually this sort of process in which we have been recovering the notion of matter from the bad approach of the Hellenistic philosophy, at the end, what we have done is we have just replaced the attributes that were usually qualifying form by those that were usually qualifying matter, no? So we just have converted matter in a sort of term that is using the qualifying that usually have been related to another term, which in this case is the one of form, no? So in this sense, for me, matter has become somehow a sort of irrelevant term, that it's a sort of placeholder that does not have any other meaning than that of all those attributes that have somehow absorbed from the original notion of form.
Good, thank you, Jordi, for a brilliant introduction of these statements and very good concepts that for sure we're gonna come back later. So let me introduce now Mitch Joachim, one of the contributors of the magazine. He's doctoral architect from MIT, from MIT, also master in Harvard University and Columbia University. He's co-founder of Terraform One and an associate professor right now at the NIU, sorry. He has been awarded as a Fulbright Scholarship and Fellowship with TED, Moshe Safdie, and Martin Society for Sustainability at MIT as well. He was chosen by World Magazine for the smartest list under 15 people for the next president should listen to. Hope to listen to you soon. And he is co-authored of several books. We also have the luck to become his publisher. The first one, XXLXA's New Directions in Ecological Design. And the newest, let me show you, which is, sorry, it's a promotional moment, Design with Life, but it is totally correlated with the topic of the Iaac Bits, and for sure, part of the content is displayed in this magazine. So, Mitch, thank you for joining us and introduce briefly your topic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's great to sort of be in Barcelona, but not be in Barcelona. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you to Actar. Thank you to Iaac, Arati, and certainly Manuel and Jordi. I agreed with pretty much most of the statements that were made. I'm going to show some images in a second, but before that, maybe I'll make a few comments, which is, I mean, for 50 years, we've been waiting for a crisis in architecture, a real crisis. We've had all kinds of wars, we've had economic issues, we've had oil spills, we've had Australia on fire, and nothing adds up to what we're experiencing now. This COVID-19 pandemic is real. We're all affected. We will never forget these moments. I mean, we're all on Zoom. These are things where we're collecting together globally. We're arguing, we're polemicizing, and we're thinking about the future. I think architecture, design, industrial design, planning, landscape, it is in part our responsibility to speculate about the next civilization, to produce that answer to get us to civilization 2.0, and to do it in a way that makes sense. There won't be one particular position or solution. There'll probably be an entire ecosystem of ideas, but it's up to us, it's our job to present that to the public, to see what our political class thinks, and to fight for a new age. So this is it. The work that we've been doing at Terraform One has been making that argument for some time. And I'm really glad to be a part of this new journal, Black Ecologies, because black to me is something that absorbs all color in the visible spectrum. Everything gets absorbed and reflects nothing back, including green, which is inside black. So we're going beyond just the normal arguments about solar panels and doing things that are smart to make economic sense, fits into some kind of particular scale or scope of a project. We're actually getting radical. Black in the United States is a very different connotation too. I think some of my colleagues here would think that this topic would be very much about racial injustice or something to that effect. It's not, it's a part of it. In fact, I don't know what's left out if it's absorbing all colors in the visible spectrum. So the work that we're doing at Terraform One, we changed our mission and our general kind of approach about 2 years ago, which is to get out of just the environmental argument and aestheticizing things, buildings to be greener. It's actually to fight against extinction. So we use design to stop extinction. Design is probably comes from the most powerful tool humans have, which is our imagination. We can create these expository narratives in detail that will let us get into this kind of next wave, this next generation, in a way that makes sense because we will explore it to such a fine level of resolution that we can tease out many of the problems and anticipate many of those problems so that we have a way of getting there that makes sense for the Earth's metabolism. So I just want to show you some of our arguments about design against extinction. And I think I'm going to share this screen. Oh, the host has disabled the screen sharing. So if the host, which is, who's that? I can fix that, that'd be fine. And I can show a couple of slides. But it's a lot of our, oh, there we go. Okay. You
can share now.
Okay, excellent. I'm doing this one. Go here. So this is just, yeah, some of our arguments at Terraform One that look at even massive movements and crises that are not even as big as the COVID-19 one. Here, you could see Hurricane Sandy affected New York, but yet not enough. It's been almost 7 years and we haven't done anything in New York to fight against the next hurricane that's coming. So if it isn't a kind of a virus that will take out humanity, it certainly will be climate change. We're all invested into making some kind of decision, design decision to change it. So what's one of the biggest problems we can imagine? It's this one. Wildlife population is less 50% lost of all wildlife since 1970s. That's every bird, mammal, fish, coral reef on this planet, insect has disappeared forever since the 70s. We are all complicit in that. Certainly in architecture and urban design, landscape, we're playing our roles, but it's everyone is contributing to that. This is an example of an endling. It's the white rhino. An endling is the last of its kind of a species. This is unacceptable. My daughters will never see them. There's only 2 left on the planet Earth. and they're gone. And we can expect more things like this happening all the time. What do we do about it in the field? What do we do to make a difference? Well, here is all the different kinds of paint by the number systems that we use in architecture and in development to kind of make sense when it comes to green on this planet. So we've got things like Active House, LEED, BREEAM, Energy Star, WELL certifications that think about making buildings greener. And that's a good thing. It really is good, but it's not enough, because if you add all of those systems together and you compile them into one list, less than 5% of the points you can get goes towards biodiversity. So less than 5% of the points you get goes towards saving plant life and animal life in and around your project site. It has massively got to shift. If anything, it should be 100% needs to be conserved. So this is our work that thinks about our overriding single predicate, which is design against extinction. This was a client that we had. It looks at, it's an insect, it's a cricket. We had thousands of them. We're working them on making a system that looked at changing food in the United States. Why do we need to change food in the United States? Actually in Europe, because we eat too many cows, pigs, chicken, and lamb. There's too much meat. We need an alternate form of protein. Plant-based protein's okay, but we actually need some things with a similar amino acid structure. So what do crickets give you? 2,000 gallons less water than a cow for the same gram of protein. So it's an alternate form of meat. It's also 300 times less carbon emissions in the atmosphere. It looks at things like this, comparing two spaces of equal measure, 100 acres on either side. One side is for the production of cattle with the same amount of protein. The other side is for the production of insect-based protein inside cities. So you save that same amount of water and greenhouse gas emissions, carbon, and do it in a way that doesn't take up the same amount of land use. We use a technology called architecture, which is space, light, air, gravity. We didn't need a lot of computation or robotics, although we did use that, or parametrics, et cetera. That's all fine. We just decided to design a place for another sentient being, which is the cricket. Design a space so that they could live happily and prosper and produce children and live in this colony. They only live 6 weeks. They move throughout the entire shelter, and then they're harvested so humans can eat them. They get ground into a powder, use Michelin-rated chefs. We fed them line rinds and apple peels and orange cores. They got really fat and really happy, and we eventually milled them into bagels, into flours and pasta, bonbons, all kinds of really yummy foods, so that we can enjoy it and that we can get Americans and Europeans to start thinking about even eating insect powder, because that was part of our job. Got to make it taste great so that Homer Simpson, the average American, would actually care and eat this stuff. It took us 100 years to eat lobsters in the United States. They were only originally fed to prisoners. So we looked at a system that was naturally ventilated with high throughput volumes of air that go through the top, that extract the air throughout the shelter, and they produce this wonderful sound, which is a magnification of the cricket stridulation or chirping. Cricket chirping is basically horny males, males that are safe, feel like the area around them is enjoyable, and they look to propagate their genes with females. So they move throughout the shelter, they project their sounds through these devices on the top, which are called cricket horns, so you can hear the entire shelter sing. They meet in these places here called cricket sex pods. It is the only, I contend, the only use of a Voronoi pattern I think that's really usable in architecture. It's to get crickets to mate. It's certainly effective. And this system was deployed. It's now at the Museum of Fine Arts in Philadelphia. We also looked at another system of farming where people can confront their relationship with food. We don't know where our food comes from today. So this is a flat pack system that's robotically milled. It's a rotegrity sphere. It could be in any dimension, whether it's 18 feet in diameter or 4 feet. It's part cabin, part farm. It goes inside an urban park or on a balcony or an urban rooftop. You grow all kinds of high yield crops on it. So you wouldn't grow corn and wheat, which would be in a flat field someplace there, but stuff you want to have local and fresh and immediate, like wheatgrass or spirulina or different types of arugula or mints. You grow your food, you produce it from pasture to plate inside your home or nearby your residence, and you have an experience of understanding where that food comes from. You're accountable for the kind of products that you make and consume. This is the inside. It's got 9 columns of sub-irrigation that trickle feed all of these different double wick plant systems, and you grow food. There is a cistern at the bottom where the water is collected and cycled back onto the top. It's on wheels, so it rotates to get the most amount of solar income. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to show, because we only have really 2 minutes before we can get into a discussion, is this project that's trying to really think about how we can save something from oblivion. We had a client that wanted us to do a green building. We don't do just green buildings. We want something more than green. I guess black is the new more than green. So here is a project called the Monarch Sanctuary. It's a double skin facade that accounts for the life of this beautiful, charismatic insect known as the monarch. It looks at its all kinds of activities over its life cycle. So here it's connected to a milkweed ecology where it lays eggs. It has a caterpillar stage, a chrysalis stage, and then the adult butterfly stage where it moves in and out like a way station and repopulates or rewilds the area around it. We have a patent on this system that is basically a pluggable terrarium that can go in any building, pretty much anywhere, and doesn't only need to have monarchs. You can have any creature that's on the edge of life. We're doing one in Basel and another one in LA with the old world swallowtail, and Adonis blue is another creature we're working with. Here it is. The system is a sanctuary that fits throughout the interstitial spaces of the building, goes to a pollinator garden on the rooftop, an education center, moves throughout the atrium and into the back. All of the building is thought of in every area that's extra as a space that would be a sanctuary for this creature that we've lost 90 million of them. They're native to New York. They fly to Mexico over 4 generations, and we got to stop them from being wiped out off the face of the earth. We got a grant from BASF and Intel. The Intel grant is projecting on these screens. So from far away across the street, you can see the kind of drama of the butterfly on the building as it's projected on these screens on the surface of that double skin facade. This is the interior. We used a drone that's an artificial butterfly that services the entire system. So it looks at the amount of waste, food, or the nectar that's feeding those butterflies. It calculates the airflow and makes sure that the population is there and happy. So the artificial butterflies take care of the living ones. We have a commission for the American Museum of Natural History to also take this project there. We've been working on their butterfly feeders that are installed today in the Natural History Museum, feeding all different types of butterflies the food that they desire. Here we work at scale with all of our organisms. So Terraform always works with a live organism. I know Ecological Studio also does that often. I think this is the future for architecture, is to include other organisms directly in our projects. We actually looked at designing a concrete at full scale using RepRap, big 3D printer, and then different types of urethane molds that are medical grade with bamboo scaffolding to make a concrete system that is articulated to meet the needs of that butterfly. This is a fireproof piece of concrete that is impregnated with fly ash. It's low embodied energy concrete, which is important. It's a product called GreenSense. It's structural, will last 100+ years. It has all different areas that the butterflies need, such as perch points, mud baths, areas for nectar feeding, air quality, and mosses and lichen that grow on the surface. Marcos Cruz, who's not here, would also have something to say about that. It fits into the double skin facade. And then we have live monarchs inside this sanctuary. This project was installed at the Smithsonian Cooper Hewitt, where you can see this double skin facade fully working and mocked up, that we can show people that this is something that could fit into a building, to do it at scale and to do it at cost. So these are the monarchs inside that particular project, moving around and enjoying that space. As much as we know monarchs are enjoying it, we know they're enjoying it if they start mating, having babies, laying eggs, and coming and going at will. That's a good indicator that people are happy, or insects are happy. So that's just some of the things that we are up to. And I'm going to stop here, and you guys can, I will stop sharing screen. And then we can have some other folks present, and then we can get into a dialogue about what it means to be Black these days. Thanks, guys.
Good. Thank you, Mitch. Amazing project, amazing statement. Now let me introduce Ecological Studio. It's an architectural and urban design studio co-founded in London by Claudia Pasquero and Marco Poletto. I will introduce them afterwards. In the past few years, the studio has built up an international reputation for its innovative work on systemic design. Its method is defined by the combination and integration of systemic thinking beyond sociologic research, parametric design, and prototyping. Completed projects that they realize are a public library, private villas, large facades, eco roofs. Ecology has also developed prototypes and installation for most of the important architectural biennales. Currently, or in 2012, sorry, they published a book by Routledge titled Systemic Architecture. Now, very brief, I will introduce Claudia Pasquero. She's a graduate architect from Turin Polytechnic. He's currently the unit master, is currently working in the unit master at Inter 10 at the Architectural Association, London.
No, sorry.
No?
Old bio. I'm professor of landscape architecture at Innsbruck University,
okay.
as well as director of the Urban Morphogenesis Lab at the Bartlett UCL, and I co-founded Ecological Studio with Marco Poletto here, which has a doctorate from the RMIT in Melbourne.
Good, thank you for doing my job. Go ahead. Okay, so you want, please start it because we are a little bit run of the time. Good.
Cool. Thanks a lot for the invitation. We are gonna share the screen. So our article that we started to write in 2018, I think, is titled Synthetic Landscape and Deep Green City Planning. One of the concern of our practice is how do we coinhabit the continuously ever-changing planet we inhabit. And I have here with me some spirulina, freshly harvested today, 22 grams. That was harvested from one of the containers that you see there. So, but we like to imagine an expanded notion of the we, to include alongside humans, big human and small humans, the plethora of complex organisms currently inhabiting the urban sphere. So these include ecosystem of autonomous electronic devices, digital algorithms, but also many forms of plants and animal intelligence, bacteria, like the one you see here, from red to green microalgae, but of course, also viruses. So this is what we define the dark side of ecology. Let's imagine that these become bio-citizens, to give a citizen to these microorganisms, and they can become actively involved in the formation and transformation of the urban landscape. From this perspective, our design practice is the exploration of what happened to the presentation.
I don't know. I just went. Go on.
So from this perspective, our design practice is the exploration of our current collective sensibility. That is our collective ability of recognizing emerging pattern of reasoning across species, materiality, and technological regime. Our collective sensibility can be triggered here, not only by logical thinking and understanding of reality, but through aesthetic, where aesthetic and spatial organization is intended as a form of meta-language, enabling a more complex level of communication between human and non-human citizens. Architecture aesthetic is no longer merely inspired by biology or computer science. It actively contributes to the actualization of their disciplinary discourse within our imagined spatial reality, as you can see here in Ortus. Architecture acquires its own transdisciplinary intelligence and sensibility, can be trained and cultivated, can become political. In our current design practice, we deploy this sensibility to access the human dimension of what we call the we, as we have defined it at the beginning, and to enrich our perception of it. This shift has the power to expand the potential and the space of design solution, so that we can achieve by remetabolizing given problems, such as climate change or the current pandemic crisis.
So synthetic landscape was the title of our contribution, and essentially we could argue that today any landscape is a synthetic if we follow the narrative or the conceptual framework that we have let's say, presented or that the team has presented so far. In our case, we wanted to make an example of a project that involved also Iaac and some of the colleagues are presenting today in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. In 2017, Claudia was curating the Biennale there, and as a studio, we provided a kind of framework for the exhibition, but also went on to develop a study with the municipality. And the starting point of this project was really looking at the wastewater system of the city. So the kind of substratum, if you want, a bacteriological substratum of the city. And this is the diagram that everyone believes being the way the wastewater system works. No? So actually there is one main water processing station at the beginning of the Pagliasare Peninsula, and all the wastewater from every single dwelling of the city converges there. In reality, when we visited the processing plant, the wastewater treatment plant, we were told that actually 40% of the wastewater leaks outside of the system in unknown locations. So we started to diagram what would be the real wastewater system that we have. So essentially, it would be a much more distributed system of small leakages and percolations that are actually feeding, or if you want, contaminating the ground, the substratum of the city in various ways. And this whole notion of contamination versus feeding is something that interests us because, as Claudia was mentioning, we think one of the key roles of design practices today is not just to answer to, let's say, known problems, but actually to use design as a form of reproblematization of these problems. That is, if we talk about pollution and contamination, what do we mean by that? How can we see it from the different perspective? And of course, the project then went on, focusing further on this area of Tallinn, which is the Peninsula Pagliasare, which is, as you see, now occupied by the wastewater processing plant, but that we have begun to reimagine in this logic of distributed system of remetabolization of the waste as a kind of landscape, as a synthetic landscape, I should say. Following the title, that indeed kind of remetabolizes, reprocesses these contaminants as nutrients. Essentially nutrients that in time will be able to create enough outputs, enough valuable outputs in terms of energy, biomass, and fertilizers to begin to grow an entirely new ecosystem in the peninsula, an ecosystem that would sustain not only human life but also animal life, as we were seeing before, being the two very much now kind of symbiotically cohabiting this landscape. And of course, this project also deals with rising sea levels and all other concerns that the city has, being a city surrounded by water in the Baltic Sea. And so, as you can see, the kind of a fast-forward landscape we are imagining is very much also utilizing these kind of wet areas or basins as part of this new expanded ecology. And then if we fast-forward, begin to zoom into an architectural scale, we started to imagine how these buildings would, in fact, transform into capsules that are inhabited, as we shall see, by these different let's say, groups of human and non-human inhabitants. And essentially, zooming even more inside, also by these kind of biotechnological apparatuses or systems that we have as a studio been playing with for several years now, in the attempt to kind of reimagine how cyanobacteria, photosynthetic microalgae could become a new layer, a new active photosynthetic layer of the city. And now, obviously, I'm going quite quickly through this set of projects. somebody is not very excited about this, I guess. But maybe it would be nice if he could mute himself. Thank you very much. So the idea is that we have tested some of these solutions, I think in the same approach as Mitch presented before. We are architects that like actually to mock up and prototype and you know, develop pilots so that these ideas are not just operating a kind of conceptual level, but really give us the possibility to test these new interfaces in the urban realm. This is a project called Photosynthetica, which is in a way perhaps one of the most kind of frugal in its kind of design, but it's for me it's very interesting because it's essentially about being able to wrap with this very thin membrane pretty much any building, not just new ones, but also buildings that need energetic and ecologic retrofitting. And as we know, these are the vast majority of buildings, and buildings that probably constitute the biggest emitters in the world at the moment. And so again, exciting when you begin to dive into the actual material and performance of these organisms. Microalgae are monocellular organisms, and that means that their body is entirely photosynthetic. When you compare their performance with a building, with a tree integrated on a building, you can see that 50 liters or 50 kilograms of living cultures have the same ability to absorb carbon dioxide as a mature tree, but their weight is 100 times less. So if we're talking about remetabolizing, or we're talking about retrofitting existing building into dense urban environments, you begin to see the opportunities that this type of direction or research may open up in comparison to the kind of traditional, let's say, green roofs or green terraces approach. Again, now I go faster. What are the benefits of these? Can be quite obvious about reducing energy consumption, improving urban air quality, sequestrating carbon, producing algae. But the interesting thing is that, of course, because it's a nature-based solution, we are doing all of these powered by the sun, essentially. The biggest kind of engine of all this process is the sun through photosynthesis. And once the pollutants and the carbon dioxide are, in this case, introduced at the bottom of the membrane, raised through the watery medium, exchange with the cells of algae, they become essentially nutrients for the algae. So that's what we normally used to understand as pollution or as a problem. From the perspective of the cyanobacteria, it is actually a resource. It is not about filtering them like with the traditional mechanical solution. It's about actually remetabolizing them. They become biomass, which has, as we know, a multiplicity of applications, both in the food industry as well as bioplastic, biomaterial industry, et cetera, as Claudia is showing, can be consumed pretty much directly on the spot. So it's you know, to come to a conclusion, it's really essentially about closing the loop. It's about finding new ways for circular metabolisms to enter the urban realm and transform it, so that what we consider pollutants become effectively resources for the production of raw materials. And again, here is an example of you know, how this becomes biomass, bioleathers, bioplastics, and these are all kind of experiments that we are conducting in the lab right now, Claudia, especially in Innsbruck.
But especially the last sentence for us is a shift on not how we use different resources, but how we cooperate with other organisms. So for us, it's a paradigm shift of how architecture can enable a new type of conversation in the planet we inhabit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claudia and Marco. Let me introduce now Andrew Adamatsky. He's professor and director in Conventional Computing Laboratory, the Department of Computer Science, University of the West of England, Bristol. He does research in reaction diffusion computing, cellular automata, Fissurian computing, massive parallel computation, applied mathematics, collective intelligence and robotics, bionics, computational physiology, many of the amazing issues that he has been published in many books. I'm gonna be short because I would prefer to listen immediately. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
Thank you very much, guys, for inviting me. And thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to publish something in your journal. It's all very cool. And for like, well, one hour, I was sitting watching you, and I was thinking, why I'm here? It's like, it's all from scientific point of view, what you are talking, well, not everything, but 80%, sounds like total madness, basically. But I'm really enjoying it because like it allows me to look at the life from different perspective. Because you are strange people, but you are very intellectual people. You are just very unusual. And participating in these meetings helped me to understand that we are all different. And we just should accept our difference and should try to find a common point of interaction. And my contribution to this issue of the journal was about slime mold. And I started slime mold in 2006, trying to imitate that all types of computation can be done with very simple amorphous creature. And like some development in parallel, there also was finding that slime mold can imitate road networks, can imitate traffic, and can imitate optimal proximity graphs. And that's how I got to your journal. Basically, that's all. I will try to save you time.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for this brief, but for sure you're going to participate.
Thank you.
I don't want to leave Andy to escape like this, because I would really like that he somehow, from the biological and computational, let's say, background of him, because I mean, he's possibly one of the very few non-architects here. So I really think that I would like to have his point of view of how we can learn from biology, or how we can work together with biology in order to, like optimize our computation, or learn on how we can, let's say, design patterns or processes or evolutionary processes, unpredicted processes for architecture and design.
Well, there were several statements during like this hour that we must save humanity, we must fight COVID, we must make like architecture somehow different. But everything which happens right now, it happens in nature. Therefore, it's natural. Therefore, we shouldn't be afraid of this. We should just accept it as it like rolls on, and that's all basically. I mean, we all worry that humanity should survive, but is it really necessary? If we humans will depart from the Earth, then about 500,000 of species which are almost extinct will come back to life. All animals will come, our houses will kind of eventually with time will be destroyed, and animals will be living in the villages. So why do we think we are so important on this earth? Why not fungi? Why not bacteria? Why not viruses? Why not slime molds? What do you think, Ariti?
Well, I think that from the work that we have seen is obvious that we're very much interested into these organisms. Claudia and Marco are also growing slime molds in their architectural practice and office. And one of the most interesting things for me when we deal with biology is probably what we have been discussing about this participation of architecture with other organisms, rather than learning from them or extracting principles, which has been the traditional way of seeing the learning from nature or the biomimicry. I think that what is at stake now is a kind of a new coexistence, no? And that is a bit what we are dealing with in this journal. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So let me introduce the last one contributors, which is Aldo Solaza. Aldo is a technologist with expertise in robotics, manufacturing, and computational design since 2011. He's the director of NOMIA, leading a multidisciplinary team towards the definition of a new design strategies informed by tech-driven application. He's also the director of Reshape, digital craft community. At Iaac, he's co-directing the Master in Robotics and Advanced Construction, as well as the Global Summer School. Aldo has been part of the Fab Academy program as a mentor of Fab Academy Paris from Sign 1 from 2015 and 2017. Aldo, you want to tell us a little bit briefly,
yes.
Please?
No, I'm gonna be extremely quick because if I know already, here the motors are already warming up and I want you to go, and not so Claudia, I want you to start this, this nice conversation. So, I mean, the contribution that we made to this journal was coming from, I mean, all the experiences that we were collecting in Iaac, but also from a special dinner that I had with Claudia Pasquero, where she started to as well trigger, I mean, put me in my ear the possibility to think of the robot that we are developing as a new part of an ecosystem. And I saw that Firas, that is also participating here in the audience, was asking, let's define an ecosystem. Timothy Morton talks about ecosystem and try to mechanically define them as the combination of multiple parts. No, I mean Timothy Morton that evidently is here even if it's not. But if you see about, if you want to consider a little bit this combination of parts, there is a medieval Neoplatonic doctrine that consider, I mean, a sort of classification of parts that maybe we can connect it to soul and body. So soul, what is human, body, what is not human, no? Also connected to what we just heard. So it seems like this distinction is also somehow related to consciousness and cognification. That is another another description, another vocabulary that that is very close to Kevin Kelly that already was mentioning before. Consciousness and cognification in terms of robotics for us is one of the most interesting topics that we could possibly explore, and the possibility to, as well, I want to test something that I'm going to use my background as a slideshow. So here is, you see, this is quite new, no? What we started to do was to think if we could design a machine, think about a robot that could be cognified. Cognification means that you give to the machine the possibility to sense, to perceive, capture, describe the space in which the machine itself is moving. So in Tallinn, invited by Claudia and Marco, we sort of created this theater together with a group of course, talented artists and experts like Angel Munoz, Christian Rizzuti, and of course the contribution of our team in Numena. And we started to explore how a machine potentially could start to take its own decision without any anthropocentric view, without any need to relate to any human willingness, but start to be part of a new ecosystem and start to interact with it. So this is the contribution that we gave, and I'm really looking forward now for the conversation of today.
Thank you so much for this so brief. Okay, probably I don't know who wants to start, but probably we can take this last contribution, no? Probably we could think how much we can merge this kind of artificial intelligence, biology, you know, the informed matter, how we can apply all of the computational knowledge into this production of the design space, no? How we could understand that the architecture is more than this static thing that we have seen so far. And I'm thinking that it is, as also Areti was pointed out in the essay, how we can think in a materially responsive architecture, no? Take it into account all of these different scales and active agents who is working on the production of the space. Who wants to start?
I want to say something because you talk about materiality, and then Jordi was explaining how not important matter is anymore, but more the adjective that is related to that matter. But I want to to share a thought which is, it is more related, let's say, with what is the body of architecture and urban design today, taking into consideration the fact that we are actually rethinking out of scratch, how materials perform, how they respond to the environment, what is their technology embedded into them, from sensors to artificial intelligence, so from physical intelligence to digital intelligence that is clearly embedded into our spaces in architecture and cities. I want to raise the issue of body of architecture. What is the new body of architecture? I mean, if we go back to thinkings of Nicolas Negroponte, or even the conversation theory of Gordon Pask and the cybernetics and Cedric Price, they have all been, or even Marcos Novak, that he had this obsession of understanding that in order for architecture to be more closer to a living organism, or to have cognitive intelligence or intelligence, it needs to have a body. Negroponte was saying that it needs to be closer to a human organism, and Novak was saying that it needs to have a body that is much more hybrid between a virtual and a physical world, no? So I just want to raise this conversation probably of what is the future body of architecture, especially after all this work that we have seen today.
May I say?
Sure.
Yeah. I think our future for architecture is that all buildings will be alive. So computation and cognition will be embedded into the walls around us. And therefore, buildings will feel us, will feel how we are feeling, will feel our emotions, our illnesses, and buildings will be helping us. And that's what now we are developing in our Horizon 2020 funded project, Fungal Architecture. We are growing houses from fungi, from mushrooms. Some part of the house is dead, but still functionalized with nanoparticles. And some part of the house is still alive. And because fungi, they have the same feelings as people have. They can feel light, electricity, electromagnetic fields. Then when you enter the building feels you, and building responds to what you want to do. So I think like my approach will be to develop interactive architecture where every part of the buildings, of the material, is computing.
Well, in that sense, maybe architecture is already alive because fungi and mosses has always been part. But it's more the role of the architect that needs to evolve in thinking architecture as an object that responds to ourselves and only to human need, to architecture that responds to also needs of non-human form of intelligence or life. So it's more of a shift of how we design and how we conceive the world around us. The organisms that populate architectural surveys have been there forever. It's just that before we try to clean them all the time and think architecture as a static object focused around human need. If we change the perception, then architecture changes. So for me, that's why architecture and design is a role at the moment, because it's not about necessarily changing or inventing something new, but it's about changing the way we conceive it.
Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to say that Mitch seems that he's ready to jump in, so please.
I certainly agree with Andy and Claudia and Irati. The idea that architecture is this profession that could solve the problems, that's important, but I guess the problem that we're facing is the very definition of it as a discipline, and that we have these different disciplines such as urban design and landscape architecture and industrial design and graphics, etc. This is not helpful anymore. It seems to be an old way of thinking that's been institutionalized and built into industrial education and meant for people to get jobs and have some kind of a career doing this. In reality, how we think about it is a heterodox We put in all these different ideas at multiple scales simultaneously to think about our built environment. There's no one single place to operate. We're working at the molecular cell level, we're at the scale of a chair, and we're working at the scale of a neighborhood in a city. That is what we must teach and what we must be, what must exist in the pedagogy from now in perpetuity. I think that if we kind of bracket these moments, we get specialization, which is useful for very particular things, but it's not useful for how we're understanding how the world works. And it's not helping this next generation solve the problems that we need to solve because they bleed through all different boundaries simultaneously. For instance, you mentioned Negroponte, you mentioned Ray Kurzweil, you mentioned Kevin Kelly. These are amazing people, all MIT people. And there's been a lot of discussion here with some notions of ideas of nature and artificial intelligence. Maybe I'll address a few of those things. First of all, what was going on in MIT and what Negroponte was thinking and Kevin Kelly mostly was this merger of all different disciplines, which happened in this heterodox. The Media Lab has moved on, it's permeated, and it's become this kind of quasi field that's still undescribable, mostly fits into art. But when it comes to ideas about computation or robotics in architecture, then we seem to use this as a partner. And I don't think we're there yet. I just don't think so. I've never looked at this computer and thought it can really help me beyond some level of, recursion, because it does that very well and maybe has emergent properties, but still requires me to think, but it's not intelligent. It is not sentient. Kurzweil wants us to get there, and perhaps we will. I think we will, but we're not quite there yet. Elon Musk has created Neuralink. He's putting this stuff into our skulls. The recent, if you got to listen to what he's talking about, we don't even need language anymore. The idea that we have language is already a program. English is a set of rules. It's a set of deterministic rules that is fitted into the idea of grammar. That's a system that I have to translate my thoughts that then move through space. You need to retranslate those thoughts and understand what I said. We have something like Neuralink. We actually can communicate deeper without speaking whatsoever. We're not there yet, but can you imagine what Andy was talking about? We have a Neuralink in our heads and we talk to our buildings. Although we're not talking, we're thinking with them simultaneously and with the environment around us. And hopefully we have a greater understanding of all those other bits that we don't pay attention to, fungus, etc. So, we're not quite there yet, but pushing these narratives and teasing out how these things will work, I think that's our job. We can design for that and show the failures because it's important, and then get to the things that work.
Fully agree, because right now computation is just what you told is just a translator between us and computer. But in future, we'll be able to convey our feelings without any computation or formal language.
That's right. Not to get onto this point, but at MIT, George Steiny, who was my professor when I was doing my doctorates in computation, he said, this is all you need to know about computing. It's a set of rules. And computing is best done so far with the pen, because this gave us the Apollo missions, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Sagrada Familia. This is still how we think. Computers help with recursion, and they'll be pushed further to be sentient beings. So we're not there yet, but I want us to be there. And maybe, I don't want to talk forever, but ideas of nature, that was Timothy Morton's earlier point before he got into dark ecology. We shouldn't use the word nature. No one knows what it means. It's different between every century and every culture. Even when you say nature in psychology, nature in architecture, nature in history of science or history, it has so many variants in its interpretation. So his earlier book, which was Ecology, Not Nature, wanted us to specify something that was quantifiable, that had a set of metrics or data that we can learn from, and helped us situate a lot of our problems in a specific science. Because nature as an idea has so many different archetypes and interpretations, it's really hard to locate its actual meaning. So, but that's fine. That's semantics. But I think that the definition of nature is like painting a watercolor in a stream. So you got blue and then it just disappears.
How do you feel, Aldo, about collaborating with machines that they are not so smart, or they're not smart enough,
Well,
or they definitely do not replace this?
No, I think, I mean, someone before Andy was talking about neural network and machine learning. I think this is the work of cognifying and computing. Cognification means computing. Computing means thinking, and everything start with vision. A lot of these training set and learning experiences that we have, even us as human beings, start with vision, start with the eyes. And the connection between eye and brain, which sounds probably familiar to you, Arete, because it was we spoke about it with the PhD proposal. But I guess this is a clear connection between as well what is happening when you are decoding reality, and that's the challenge that we have. I mean, that's why we are talking about machines that are embedded with sensors, robots that are embedded with sensors and neural networks, digital brains, artificial brains that can compute, can classify the information that is collected and takes their own decision. I mean, I think this is one of the main challenges that we have also and I think also another opportunity in design, because it connects everything that is physical into a digital environment that somehow can start to inform differently the way that we program spaces, that we classify physical information, and we start to maybe take decision in the design environment. Mitch, do you agree? Or Claudia? Claudia, give me a feedback. Yeah.
Well, the question is also, what do we expect from communication with architecture? Because I think we need to make some actualized steps here. But of course, we cannot, we need to understand how materially we translate this information, and we start communicating through prototypes that are actualized and yeah, can make a first step.
It's all stuck.
No, it's all stuck. My connection is.
We hear you. We hear you.
Heard you.
Ti sentiamo, we can hear you correctly.
Maybe she's not listening nice.
Yeah, maybe she doesn't hear us.
No, let me give a question, because as Arete was pointed out, which is the new body of architecture, since we understand that everything has to be connected, no matters any gain, again, the scaling we are operating, because from the micro into the macro, even though into planetary understanding scale, no? But if we should change the way we are producing and thinking architecture, who should be teaching us? I mean, who we be included in the academical program, and probably you, Arete, could tell us how you are facing these new approaches into the Iaac, no? But probably how much a biologist perspective, neuroscience approach, computational approach, knowledge could be included in the production of the design. Finally, which is the particular and the specific field that we architects should be included this knowledge into our process of design?
Well, if we are thinking about education, I think I somehow follow the thinking of Mitchell. At Iaac, we see every day that it is impossible that as solitary artists, architects, or any other professionals alone could solve the current challenges. They are so complex in the different levels of their operation and their effects that it is impossible that one discipline could give a solution to any of these challenges. So in our let's say pedagogical model, first of all, we learn all together with our students. I mean, we don't always have the answers, because we are trying to create this kind of merge of disciplines. And when you are creating this merge of disciplines and you are working on bases that you have no references, or you are actually, you know, like designing by discovering and designing by prototyping and designing by making mistakes and failures, and designing by testing to see whether what you have designed makes sense anyways. When you are within this process, you have two risks. One is that you stay enclosed in your laboratory and you keep on working with your amazing geniuses from the different disciplines. And then you keep on developing certain things that they are super novel, scientifically very relevant, but not relevant for the society. And they stay within this laboratory, right? And then there is a kind of a circle that it's not always easy to go out, because at some moment you need to somehow find the balance between this multidisciplinarity, this scientific rigorosity, and the impact that we need to bring into the life that surrounds us, the impact that we need to bring into a society that cannot always follow these debates that we are doing today all together, the impact that we can bring to different, let's say, agents or stakeholders of the city. So that is one risk that when you are working with this experimental approach, the only, let's say, or I'm not sure if it's the only, but the one way that we're trying to solve it is that we always try to connect our research with pilot projects. No, it's not easy, because as I was saying at some other debate like a few hours ago, the construction sector is one that is very slow to embed or to accept innovation. For many reasons, not because of the logistics and the bureaucratic processes, but also because it has to serve certain certain functions that require a lot of time until things change. You know, like security of people and creating, building processes that they are not so easy to change from one day to the other. So that is, let's say, a first risk that we see here, and we need to solve it by always creating these pilot projects. Of course, these pilot projects are not always successful, you know. And the second risk is that you come up with projects whose nature is very difficult to categorize, no, or to, as Mitchell again was saying before, it's very difficult to place them, whereas they're talking about design, whereas they're talking about biology and degrowth and contamination, or whereas they are talking about, you know, like engineering and molecular or synthetic biology. So it's a kind of another risk that you're trying to touch a lot of different disciplines because you need them, and somehow what you're proposing or what you are creating might appear superficial in some of these disciplines that you are touching, and might appear very, very far away from the building or the built environment that you want to somehow affect. No, so it's not an easy task to be able to, let's say, affect our discipline or the discipline of the built environment within this experimental education, but it is definitely very, very useful for the next generation of professionals, because it radically changes the mentality of how we think and how we operate, and it radically also changes the processes of how to use architecture or design in order to raise awareness to society and create a positive impact. So yeah, I'm not sure if I answered, Ricardo, but you know, it was more like a brainstorming of the difficulties and the potentials at the same time.
Yeah, thanks. I know that Manuel would like to say something about that, please.
Yes, no, also because I want to ask some of the questions in the chat of Piras that say it might be a bit constructive that contributors first have a take on defining nature or ecology. Well, I am very disciplined and I enter in the definitions of the British or in Wikipedia, and it's very curious because nature, they say, phenomenal physical world that includes organisms, plants, animals, lands, and other forms and products of the earth as opposed to human creations. Interesting, no? This is the definition of the memory that we have in our centenarial thing. The ecology, no? The same. The branch of biology link with the relations between organisms and their physical surrounding and behaviors. Ecology is more or less, as we say with Jordi, a kind of relational system or a system that is able to do relations between systems. Well, the big thing is that we have a paradox because these definitions are probably linked with another era, with another memories. I was thinking the projects of Mitch or the projects of, I don't know, of Marco and Claudia, a lot of projects that today, not today immediately, but probably in 10 years, will change our memory, and we will understand the nature and the ecology with another kind of images. Today, the images are the classical images that have been the images and the imaginarium that are there for centuries. No? But if we take these two things as strange, no? Nature is not related with it's related with the humans, because with the humans are animals, but not with the humans' creations. Why? Probably because the human creations were creations in the past that linked with the static, with the stable, with the impositive, with the objects that were not reacting with the things. But today, we are doing objects that are sensible, responsive, reactive, relational, interactive. We interact with information. And for this, sure that our creations can be part of the nature because they are part of this interaction between informations, environments, and systems. And probably for this, the sustainability and the development is part of this revolution, because the revolution is the interactions between informations and environments and social elements. The other thing is the ecology. The ecology is, if we are, the nature can be, our creations, human creations can be part of the nature, not ourselves as human. Our creations are not only artificial, but part of a new kind of natuphysis, as Eduardo Arroyo said in some time, a kind of artificial natural things that are hybrid, but are part of the nature because they interact with the environment, they interact with the, in this case, they are doing relational processes with other systems, and because they are doing relational processes with other systems, organisms, etc., plants, biological elements, etc., we are part of this new kind of ecology. But probably it's not the ecology that we knew. It's another new step of the ecology, as the nature is. We are also doing a new, how to explain, contribution to the nature. The nature is all, but our creations can be also part of this nature. And this is my contribution, and I think that we are exploring this in this issue. No?
Thank you, Manel. Someone else would like to, or probably from the audience, do some questions?
I would just like to build a bit on what Manuel just said, that especially in the term of the word ecology, I think probably, at least as I understand it, and as I understand in relation to this number, it's based in its etymological sense of oikos, no? So it's based in its understanding of house. So actually what I would say that is the point of Black Ecologies is that is denaturalizing what has been naturalized. No? So the term oikos, the term home, original understanding as home, which is not nature, which is somehow the opposite of nature at that point, it became naturalized. It became a term used associated with nature. And somehow what we are saying is that we are denaturalizing it again. No? So we are coming back to its original sense of home, understanding home as those set of walls, windows, objects, and other homes that conform our habitat. No? So with one specific exception, which is that we are not anymore the users of that house, of that oikos, but we are part of that house, of that oikos. We are one part in between others of that oikos rather than being an external entity that is inhabiting that house. My second comment has to do with the way we are evaluating the impact of what we are saying. So we are speaking about neurons, about bacteria, about all these elements, but at the same time, we are not evaluating it just which is its impact on our society or on our political regime. We are aiming to evaluate which is that impact in architecture. And that's somehow the goal of this conversation, as far as I know, or the goal of the magazine. So I would like that we are also maybe relating this new idea of ecology or of nature with very maybe traditional or disciplinary questions of architecture. So the way we are understanding what is private and what is public space, the way we are circulating inside the building, the way the building relates with the ground, the way the building relates with the city, the way we understand what is interior and what is exterior. So probably to frame, to evaluate this impact of Black Ecologies or of this new techno-nature in architectural terms somehow means to enter in dialogue with those categories. No? Otherwise, probably we jump in a more sociological or economical or political discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jordi. Any questions for the audience?
I see in the chat that there are several questions. Benjamin, Aditya, Oscar has a question for Mitchell. Benjamin, do you want to unmute and discuss with us?
Yeah, mine wasn't really a question. It was just maybe more of a contemplation on what the word black means in what you guys have written and are discussing. And I wasn't trying to make it like a societal thing, but just bringing up the possibility of where all this can go beyond just a publish or a discussion within a academic setting or in a practice or studio. But if that's something that you want to steer away from, because I think Jordi kind of said you want to keep it in the more architectural terms and more true to our practice, then maybe we steer away from the societal implications.
Well, I think that's the steering away from societal implication would basically invalidate the whole point of the experimentation that we do, at least from my perspective. I think that the kind of framework that we have created here in Ecological Studio, I think that sense that probably can be said as well for many other of the participants here, it's really operating across. And you know, if, you know, obviously we have been dedicating a lot of time in kind of research and trying to build up the know-how, you know, with the practice, the attempt has always been to essentially create a translation, or at least to search for scenarios where this know-how could have an impact and could be impactful. And I think that, you know, if on one side the industry, you know, understood as building industry is possibly one of the hardest one to crack, I would say, but at the same time, I think there are emerging opportunities which we found very interesting. And I think that's one of the remit of the Photosynthetica project was precisely that one. And, you know, this is not just within cultural institutions, but also intergovernmental institutions like United Nations development programs, for instance. They are operating in an interesting niche. We have started to collaborate with the corporate sector. It's also somehow complicated, but I think it's a direction that as architects we should pursue. Like, we're now working with pharmaceutical industry on one side, the fashion industry on the other side. They are all searching more or less for ways to close the loop in a way. They know their business model cannot continue like that, and they know they need to find ways to close the loop. And I think that's where architect can actually bring an interesting and, you know, powerful impact. And maybe this is also opening up ways for practices to operate that are not the conventional, let's say, relationship client designer that we all know or imagine. But, you know, there are scenarios in which actually our you know, we can leverage, let's say, our know-how in ways that are more powerful, and that is actually, there is a lot of demand for that. So I think it's you know, it's like, you know, Reti was saying, it's a hard journey at times, but I think that there is definitely a kind of a opening up of opportunities where this know-how can be tested and can, you know, have an impact. I believe that's also what Mitch was referring to before in terms of, you know, not, you know, being a critical time. I think that, you know, it's becoming more and more widespread understanding that something has to change, and you know, and I think we have the power to leverage the know-how and then kind of bring it to where it can have an impact.
I think Marco made a number of great points, and I think Jordi's idea of oikos and that the early Greek understanding of the meaning of ecology in the whole house is also great. And to get into what Arati was saying and to try and answer Benjamin as far as what our profession needs to do. And I think mostly that's going to come back to education. You know, Manuel was talking about different definitions of nature, old ones and new ones. And what kind of field can we add to this kind of idea of architecture and architecture science? And the answer is pretty much, it's not so matter the field, it's the methodology. We are turning out degrees in architecture that are, it's too quick. 5 years is, I know it seems long to some folks. I went to school for 13 years, don't do that. But I do think we need to have architecture where there is a capital A architecture of groups that take a very long time and study for a very long time at a doctorate level, and they get out with that kind of comprehension of their fields. Mm-hmm. And they do that in two forms, which is the kind of the generalization, or what we call the composer, and then the digger. The composer is someone that goes out and finds branches of knowledge that are already available, pulls those branches in, and starts formulating something together. A little bit of violin, a little bit of percussion, some string instruments, and you get an idea of what your general set is or your goal. A digger is someone that looks so specific into a field of knowledge. It takes something like 5-7 years of working towards a very narrow goal where they only have 4 or 5 colleagues on Earth that understand what they're doing. And in any good doctoral program, you do both. You compose and you dig. Then the larger question is, where does the field need to go? And how do we include society? Because Jordi brought that up, and I agree. Well, this is a sort of a general rule. And this comes from Yuval Harari and a few others in an argument with Sam Harris, which is you need to think of all of us together on an airplane. That's everyone in Europe, America, China, Russia, Global South. And as a people, we can decide democratically where that plane needs to go. That needs to be democracy. But how we get there, that's up to the pilots. That are the specialists. That's the architects, the engineers, those that can focus and drive that plane specifically to where it needs to go. So I think it's a combination of those elements. You'll never have anything perfect, but it's going to start with that intensity and depth in education and the time it takes to actually make an original contribution to this field.
Mitch, maybe, you know, I want to jump on this. I absolutely agree with what you said, but there is one, I mean, I absolutely agree with the purpose of it, but there is another phenomena that Kevin Kelly is describing when he talks about the 12 forces that will shape the future of our society, no? That is this phenomena of beginners. So he said that we are living in a moment where technology is so fast, and in general, all the collective production of knowledge is so wide that constantly you are back at your beginner position. So it's not really, for me, a timing of education. It's just the understanding that it's going to be continuous. It's going to be a continuous line. And on the other side, I consider that this is kind of a sort of a new humanism that we are living, no? The possibility to start creating a dialogue with different expertise that can, at a certain point, can converge in our profession and bring value to it. But on the other side, exactly what you said at the end, no? The pilot. Technology is effective when is accurate, when is extremely specific. So there is a level between the capacity to develop an holistic perception of his impact and the development of his critical taking place that is completely different. No? Our two speeds, they are completely different. And I guess our abilities, they want to understand what to take from professions and different expertise and skills that at a certain point needs to converge, no? Needs to bring their precise technology into our profession. And I go back to the topic of cognition. And cognition for me is also a cognition of the impact that our design decisions and the relevancy that they trigger, you know? And maybe looking at your work, one question mark could be, and the one of Claudia and the research in Iaac, I mean, is also how much to balance the natural and the artificial in the decisions that we are making, no? The cognitive decisions, and how much understand that we are not really building your design, your nice facade, or whatever, our facade, whatever is it. We are building an ecosystem. And I guess this is through an ecosystem of professionals. So I think this is, you know, the interesting challenge that we have, and also the refocus that our profession needs to have. Maybe you never get an architectural degree. It doesn't exist. It will be just a continuous process of learning.
Well, I don't think we are going back to humanism. I would say more that we are creating inhumanism, but I understand your point. As a period of time prior to the Renaissance and the sort of first industrial revolution, where the segregation, we have created a segregation of production, but also segregation of knowledge. We have defined architect as a specific discipline, biology as a specific discipline, arts as a specific discipline, while this is simply our cultural definition of them. And I completely agree with Aldo that to produce new architecture, we also need to reframe how we define ourselves. Maybe like in the case of Ecological Studio, we can define ourselves algorithmically, having a certain percentage of architecture, a certain percentage of biology, and a certain percentage of computation knowledge and else. But it's just a percentage, is not the field as it is defined nowadays, but is more a specificity of the ecology that we define. And I call it inhumanism because in this ecology there are also non-human intelligence that contribute, right? But in that sense, I agree with Aldo that we need to try and reformalize and reframe the way we conceive ourselves, but also try and reformalize the way we operate and we present ourselves to avoid the risk that what we produce is conceived as a gadget, but actually change the way we inhabit the planet.
Fully agree with Claudio. We should understand we're just part of the fabric and we're part of nature. And if we don't respect nature, nature will hit back, as what now happening with COVID is actually nature showing us that actually we can be eliminated very quickly if necessary. but nature doesn't do that. Another example is cancer. Now, medical doctors reconsider cancer because previously tumors were removed. Now tumors are kept in place. Because what happens in human body, we have large tumor and many small cells. If we remove large tumor, then small cells start to grow immediately because tumor before being removed managed to send signals to small cells to replicate. And it's another example that we should all live like in harmony and interaction with each other.
Which sometimes is not harmony, but yeah, in interrelationship with each
Well,
other.
I would say
Systems kill themselves. Yeah, but yeah, I completely agree with you. But yeah.
Basically, nature tries to keep everything balanced. Indeed, unfortunately, some people, animals will die, and no one wants to die because we are biologically hardwired to want to live. But nature tries to keep balance. So nature tries to stay logical.
And nature makes mistakes, and how it evolves. No, it's
nature never makes mistakes. Nature never makes mistakes. What we see is only kind of our human apprehension that people die very sad, very sad, body sad. But it's what happens naturally. When like beetles die or fish die, we are not crying, right? And sometimes fish in the ocean dies in the millions. And we're not crying, but when people are dying, we are crying because we are more kind of related. Therefore, I think whatever happens is all natural.
No, let me bring to the, probably that will be the last questions, and because we need to close, but let's back to this question that Mitch was pointed out. What does it mean black for each culture? I mean, because in somehow Morton is finishing the book questioning that the non-human beings in some way can help us if we are relating or establishing with the human and non-human beings these kind of things, we can bring some kind of bright into the dark. So there is something that we need to enhance. Dark is only a negative question, or it means something that is in some way spreading or widening the way we are looking into the ecological or into the nature.
But it's not negative at all from my point of view. The dark side of ecology is not negative. It's the capability of rethinking and redesigning aspects of ecology, such as bacteria or other organism waste that are usually ignored, but that are part of the system. And therefore, if we design them, if we interact with them, if we create a different type of relationship, rather than ignoring them, we are less ignorant of the system. So this element, some of which might have, at the first impact, the negative connotation, in my opinion, if you start to interact with them and design them, and discover even an aesthetic aspect or a spatial quality out of these processes, then they are just part of overall ecology. They are not necessarily the negative one. It's rather almost a philosophical question of, also don't always staying with the trouble and being able to encompass and redesign and develop new knowledge about this system so that we overcome the disconnection that we have at the moment that Slavoj Žižek called disavowal. I always pronounce this word very badly, but disavowal, so disconnection, the fact that we know there are ecological problems, and we go outside and we see a world where these are not manifested. But if we actually will see it and design it and expose it, we create a different type of relationship with this element that are apparently dark.
Because black includes all colors. The black means very much inclusive we accept everything, and we try to live in harmony with any living creature.
Yeah, I guess from the perspective of urban design and architecture is really about this inclusivity, which unfortunately, let's say green architectures as such, they somehow failed to address, you know, because as we shall see, like many green projects in their sort of necessity to be green, somehow failed to be inclusive in many levels, socially, ecologically, economically, and so on and so forth. And so that's the whole issue that I think we are kind of facing when it comes to really push this change at the level of design. And you see, you know, even project very celebrated recently, green project, which somehow failed to address this aspect. So for me as a designer, it's very exciting because it's also kind of really enabling, liberating a whole series of potentially radical solutions that, you know, up until just a few years ago would be considered, you know, kind of inconvenient, unacceptable, you know, outside of the boundary of what the discipline may consider, you know, relevant. And I think right now they're actually becoming more and more the core of a bigger movement. So I think that's for me, I think what this books for this publication celebrates is this big transition, which in my mind it's you know, been in the pipeline, and you know, many of us have been working on it for a few years, but I think it's surfacing now. I you know, like you said, I think in the next few years, you know, hopefully we will see that beginning to change the perception about the nature, urban landscape, synthetic landscape, and so on and so forth. And you know, and kind of really also become more of a public domain, you know, in the kind of more general audience, which still is a kind of on the edge, you know, of questioning these assumptions. So surely there is
I agree absolutely
a lot of work
with Claudia, Marco, and also with Andy. But sometimes the words are a kind of bullets that we launch to change a little some perceptions. I remember in a moment of transition as today, because we are in a moment of transition. In the next 10 years, not only the information, the digital, but also the artificial intelligence, also all the things that you are doing that are incredible, will absolutely change our conditions. But I remember in the 80s, at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, it was a moment of change, and the name realism was very linked with the postmodernity, the idea of monumentalism, the idea of pragmatism, etc. And it was the name dirty realism that was used for the novels, etc., to say, hey, there is another realism. That this is not the realism that you are talking about, this realism about the pragmatism of the old-fashioned things, etc., the pragmatism, the rational thing. And I remember perfectly this idea of dirty realism that were very linked with the periphery, etc., etc. No? Now I think that when Timothy use dark ecology, or in our we prefer black, probably because Andy say black is all the colors and no color is something. It will be possible also to use dirty ecology. Why not? No, but it's better black. You know, I think that is because not only the ecology is changing and the nature, but also probably all our nature is able to be responsible with our environment. We need to be responsible with our environment, but at the same time we are proactive. We are not only conservative, we are conservative and proactive. And this is linked with a new change of technologies, culture, and sensibilities. And these kind of words, as I say, the words sometimes are not metaphors for us. They are bullets. They are, how to explain, some marks to express some change moments.
I think there is something.
I just want to interject real quickly because Manuel brought up bullet and words that have that are like bullets, and I think that we often talk about the silver bullet that's going to solve all the problems, and we know there's no such thing as a silver bullet, but I like to use the term silver buckshot. So you have a big shotgun with lots of small bullets that fly out and just hit everything. And I think we've already produced the answers. When we talk about this environmental calamity, this crisis, there are libraries in Europe and the United States with all the possible solutions we need for energy, waste, food, water, mobility systems. They're all there. They've been there since 20 years plus, and we keep on making more. Dark ecology, not black ecology. Dark ecology started with Kingsnorth and a few others, Paul Gilding, where they said the earth is full and that the ideas from science and engineering, etc., from this class, they're not being put to use because we have a capricious public. We have a failed political state, and we're not making the decisions that we need, and there's a lot of ambiguity. And therefore, dark ecology, or the dark ecologists, decided to retreat from activity. And they went into these spaces of hiding because they knew that no one was listening to their answers. Or they became eco-terrorists like Greenpeace, or even more extremists like Earth First, because they just wanted to resist. There was just no way they were going to be satisfied with what's happening. So if that's dark ecology, and then there's, of course, deep ecology, where it was drawn from. Arne Næss in Norway said that it wasn't so much about the idea of systems or communities. It was about all things have identity. Everything has a name. Humans have names, dolphins have names, rocks have names. Everything is a web of life, and there is no hierarchy. Men aren't more powerful than women. Humans aren't more powerful than wolves, and wolves aren't more powerful than carrots. Everything relates to one another. So black ecology, to me, seems to be this final frontier. That's it. We've heard every narrative. It's enough of these narratives. Let's get to some action and let's do it. And we are making progress. I think we are. But to me, this is the forefront, it is the tip of the spear of this new avant-garde of what we need to do to make things happen. So that's might be my closing remarks. I don't know what our time constraint is.
I just want to say one more thing, just for the sake of, like confusing a bit the conversation of the last minutes. And I want to raise also, the thinking towards ecologies, that they are not necessarily related with any biological, with any, let's say, environmental aspect, no? And I want to say that because I believe that this is a principle of the Black ecology. For the last years at Iaac, we are working in collaboration with Neil Harbisson. Neil Harbisson is a young creator, artist. He has embedded sensors and electronics in his body, so that he's able to see colors, because he has a disease that he cannot, let's say, detect colors. And together with his colleagues and his friends, he has created what he calls the Trans-Species Society. And we are supporting him to develop and to design certain technological solutions that they could embed into their body, because what they want to achieve, as he said to me, is a new ecology of augmented senses, no? So he doesn't want to use the technology in order to augment capacities, as probably in the singularity idea of like augmented self, but he wants to use technology, or they want to use technology in order to augment its senses, to be able to be connected with every vibration of Earth, every earthquake, to be able to, see at night and be and connect more with different kind of species surrounding them, etc., etc. So I want to also highlight that there is an accelerated society that is surrounding us, and we are part of it, and we are accelerating ourselves as well, because we are becoming kind of cyborgs with all this mobile technology around us. And this is a society that requires another understanding of what is ecology, and another understanding of how to design with this aspect of ecologies around the different needs of every group. And I just want to say that because I don't want people to close thinking that what we're talking about is another aspect of green or another color of green. No, it's something that goes beyond what climate and what Smitzel was saying, and what previous let's say movements in relation to ecology has shown us. It goes a step beyond, and it's a radical change.
Absolutely agree. Thank you all. We must to close the session. Sorry about that. And again, please have a look into the magazine. It's an amazing content and very absolutely necessary to talk about this and bring this knowledge into our academies and into the society. Thank you again. See you in the next lunch, let's say.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you a lot for the contributors.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Ciao, ciao.